you know, Dallas is really a big part of CALLAS's life and career for several reasons. First, because this is really where she was able to create, you know, not only parts, you know, like Medea, which was very famous production here, but even be part of a whole production that was tailor-made for her, especially by Larry Kelly, who was the director of the Dallas Opera then, and who created those opera seasons around her. She had met Larry Kelly in '54, a few years before, in Chicago, and when, you know, there was this whole thing in Chicago when they parted, and Kelly came to Dallas and invited CALLAS over, and she found here an approach to opera that was very modern. That is the way she describes it, and at the same time it was in contrast with what was happening at the Met in those days, where they kind of had all these older productions that she also was part of because it was the Met, but she didn't enjoy those productions as much. She was really craving for new productions, for a more modern approach, also for different operas than the usual repertoire. Like she says, the usual routine, and you know, she says, I don't do routine. So she really found in Dallas something different. And the freedom that she was given allowed for a couple of really beautiful seasons to happen here, and some of the most incredible productions, and Medea was definitely part of it. And we're very lucky to have found some footage of that Medea that was completely unknown, and it's in the film now. And you know, there is this famous scene where Medea screams at Jazzone, and the picture has become world famous. You know, Diana Vreeland had that picture on her wall at her office in New York, and we have found the footage of that scene that happened in Dallas. So there is a lot of connections, and obviously bringing this film to America this year is so special, because a lot of people don't know that she was American born. A lot of people don't know that she was born in New York, and of course they know her connections with the opera world in America. But I think for her it was always a little bit like coming back home. You know, she considered herself as being American. She says in the film, I'm rather proud of it, and there was a strong connection between her and America. Yeah, I would have never dreamed that the film would get distribution from Sony Pictures Classics and be brought to the theaters in America. So it's quite wonderful.
As far as unearthing information about her, can we jump to the Frost interview?
Yeah.
And I think that story alone could be made into a movie of how that came about. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. Well, it's a very special interview. It's a very special material that basically it happened in 1970. It aired live on television, and then it was not preserved, not recorded, and was completely lost and forgotten. So when I started off this work, I didn't even know about it. I wasn't aware about that interview. So the first part of my quest was retrieving CALLAS's friends and her loved ones all around the world, basically, and meeting them. And through those meetings, I was entrusted with a lot of material, a lot of personal material, like the private Super 8 home movies that you see in the film, private recordings, letters, things like that, and also some other stuff, some tapes, some real tapes, etc. And that interview was part of some of this material. One of her friends had actually recorded it and kept one of the only copies. So whenever I first watched it, not knowing what it was, not knowing how precious it was, I realized immediately that it was so different from any other interview she had given before or after. It was just that moment in her life. You know, it was a couple years after the breakup with Onassis when he married Jackie, and she was kind of trying to find a new path in her life, in her career. She wasn't singing anymore for quite some time, and the way the interview happened with Frost and the way he got around, you know, asking her the questions that she would not usually answer, especially about her personal life, her private life, opened her up in a way that is very different. And it was very obvious to me that this should become the thread of the film. So actually the whole film is like a flashback from that moment, from that interview, where she's speaking her heart and reveals the most important thing about her. That is the beginning of the film, which says there are two people in me. There is Maria and CALLAS, and this is such a key in understanding who she truly was. And a lot of other stuff and other secrets, shall we say, that she shares throughout make it really, really special. And so the film is built around it as a flashback of her looking back at her own life. And then we go back to all those episodes from her childhood up to the later years of her life. And we remain with her all the time, like she's speaking and telling this story to us.
It's fascinating, that duality that she obviously lived and understood, but to see the way your film perfectly mirrors that. Was it harder to find more footage or more, like later on in the film where you go to the letters especially?
Yeah.
Was there a harder time trying to find the Maria compared to the CALLAS, or was there enough material in all your research to get both of them on?
There wasn't enough material to begin with, and that is, I think, one of the main reasons why such a film could have not been made before, because there was so little material available on her, and almost nothing on Maria. It was, you know, the little that we had was about CALLAS and the performances and the recordings, but it was very important for me that Maria has a decent part of the film and of the story, because the film is Maria by CALLAS in a way that behind CALLAS she can reveal Maria to us, and the connection between the two, what life experiences and life struggles in her own personal life nourished her performances and her artistry, how these two connect, how whatever she sung in terms of the lyrics of what she was performing had a connection with what was happening in her own life at that time. All of that are things that I really wanted to explore, and beyond being able to share who she was as a human being, very far from the cliche and the image that we can have of her, that some people had of her, you know, as a diva and all of that, and you see her as a human being completely different, and you see also the vulnerability that I think is so moving to understand that behind these kind of strengths and temperament, there was a woman who was actually very fragile and who struggled a lot.
With all the information you found about her, I mean, there's so many intriguing things. I mean, I think it's fascinating for us here in Dallas, your footage of her with Toy, her little poodle.
Yeah.
That's something that became a story here in Dallas. But if you had the opportunity to ask her anything or had one question for her, what would you be most interested in learning about her now that you've been able to unearth the most information we've ever seen about her? I mean, is there one question you'd love to ask her?
Well, you know, having spent 5 years literally with her, in a way, a lot of my questions have been covered, and I think the film answers a lot of the questions about who she was and why she did what she did and all that. But you know, in the beginning of the film, Frost asks her in a battle who would win, Maria or CALLAS, and I would be curious to have her answer on that. And I think in a way everyone can make his own answer at the end of the film, you know, get a pick at who actually won, Maria or CALLAS.
Well, Tom, thank you for the time. It's a wonderful movie, and it's
Thank you.
wonderful that you've made it into books and an expedition. It feels like you've given a new life to Maria and to CALLAS. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.